right, hello everyone. A lot going on right now. I'm sure a lot of you have heard, but Russian President Vladimir Putin, in an address to his people just a couple of minutes ago, announcing that he has decided to launch an operation into Ukraine, once again under his kind of false pretenses of liberation, of denazification, stuff like that. He made that announcement almost overlapping with the United Nations Security Council meeting, which is underway right now. In fact, I'll take you to the scene so you can see it. But essentially, this opened with the Secretary General saying that this entire time he thought that the prospect of peace was there, that he never really thought that Putin was going to follow through with the execution of an invasion, and he admitted tonight that he now believes that he was wrong about that. I mean, he didn't hear Putin's speech at that point, but he once again made a final plea to Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying that there's still an opportunity for peace, that it doesn't necessarily just have to go straight to military warfare just because he already announced the independence of those two nations. So the Security Council meeting underway right now. We'll probably go into it at any time if there's any significant speaker. We know that the UN ambassador for the United States just spoke. The Secretary General, of course, kicked it off. Maybe if they go to Ukraine or Russia at any point, we'll pop in there and see what they're saying right now. But shortly after President Putin's address, we did get reports that there are explosions going on in multiple Ukrainian cities right now, even in Kyiv. In fact, I'll show you a clip that just played on CNN, which is rather remarkable. But we're hearing it coming in cities really all across the western part of Ukraine at this point. And shortly before, we did kind of get a hint of maybe what we should expect. Here's Marco Rubio tweeting. He's the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, so he's privy to a lot of information that other people aren't. He first tweeted, "The Russian invasion of Ukraine is now underway." And then he said, "In the hours to come, Russia will conduct strikes on air defense systems, move to cut off Kyiv from eastern Ukraine, move to cut off Ukraine's military forces on the line of contact in the east to prevent them from falling back to defend Kyiv." So it looks like this almost is shaping up to be a full-scale invasion of at least the eastern part of Ukraine leading up to Kyiv. But I do want to show you what aired on CNN just a couple of minutes ago, because it was rather remarkable. Here's a live broadcast that was going on CNN. In fact, I'll go to the beginning so you could see it. But right after the announcement by Putin, they go to Matthew Chance, who's live in Kyiv right now. And I'll play you it. I hope you can hear this, but check it out.
Oh, I tell you what, I just heard a big bang right here behind me. I thought we shouldn't have done the live shot here. There are big explosions taking place in Kiev right now. I can't see where they're taking place from this vantage point here on top of the roof of the hotel in central Kiev. And I can't explain what they are, but I heard 4 or 5 explosions a few moments ago. I don't know whether our viewers or whether you in the studio there could hear what I just heard. You could resist. Oh, I tell you what, I just heard a big bang.
So there you go. Just a couple of minutes ago, that was the scene taking place. Now, we don't know exactly what those explosions are from at this point, and it's worth noting, too, that just because there's other explosions going on doesn't mean that necessarily that they're coming from Russia within themselves. You have to remember that there are those Russian separatist movements in the eastern part of Ukraine. There could be operations being launched from that, but let me just monitor this really quickly. Monitor. There we go. So it's important to remember that there are separatist movements taking place in Ukraine, but I mean, the corroborating evidence shows that this is perhaps Russia. In fact, we're hearing of other explosions taking place in this region right here. This is the Kramatorsk in the Donetsk region, and I guess one of the reasons why that's getting hit particularly hard right now, according to reports, is because that's the site of large Ukrainian air base. There's also many Ukrainian missile defense systems that could be operational there. So as we were going back to what Marco Rubio was saying earlier, conduct airstrikes on air defense systems. That appears to be the first wave of attacks taking place. If this is, of course, Russia that is launching this offensive at this point, although it's safe to say, I think, that we can make that conclusion right now. But as we said, it's not just right there as well. It's the northern part of Ukraine. There are reports going on, and in fact, Kharkiv is one city that we're taking a look at as well. That's up in that northern part of Ukraine. It's actually outside of the Donbas region that a lot of people thought that most of this activity was going to take place in. But in fact, we do have live video, or not live video, we do have video coming in of that situation right there. I'll show you this So there are explosions taking place in that city right now. A lot of moving parts, a lot of different, it looks like, operations underway on different parts of Ukraine. We're keeping a close eye on all of this, but I do want to show you what took place initially at the very beginning of the night. So this is in Crimea, the southern part of Ukraine. This was actually before the United Nations Security Council meeting. This was before Putin really made his declaration. But this is at a checkpoint in the Ukrainian area right north of Crimea, and you can see that there were screenshots taken right here. This is a troop that was kind of responding to an incoming, what we can only assume is an incursion. This is, here, I'll show you on the map where this is. This is Crimea at the bottom part of the screen, and then that red dot is the outpost that we're looking at. And there was a live feed going on, and you saw them all of a sudden very quickly and rapidly react. And then a short moment later, it went completely dark. The lights went out, and we didn't really know what was going on. In fact, this feed eventually went out. But I do want to go you through the motions because, as I said, you see the the gentleman kind of retreating, then you see everything go dark, and then a short moment later, you do see another troop appear, different uniform, kind of walking around, going through the outpost area. So that may be the first image that we saw of a Russian incursion into Ukraine. Now, once again, this all needs to be verified, although Putin shortly after announced that he would be going through with an operation. Crimea would be one of the entry points into Ukraine. So that was something that perhaps we'll look back and say these are the beginning moments of what was taking place in Ukraine that night, the very first time where a Russian troop kind of launched that operation outright into Ukraine. So right now the question is, how far are these troops really going to go? And in fact, we do have a statement coming out just right now by President Biden. I'm going to put this up on the screen for you guys and read it along because I'm seeing it for the first time myself. But here it is. This is Sam Stein from Politico tweeting it out. The prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction that this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. He goes on to say that he'll be monitoring the situation from the White House. He'll then be meeting with his G7 counterparts in the meeting, and then of course more sanctions are going to be imposed against Russia in response to this. The biggest escalation that you could say, I mean, for a long time, I'll just put it that way. I mean, maybe Georgia is comparable, but I mean, you have to remember even Crimea, I mean, there wasn't a single shot fired. It was a kind of a different situation altogether. But as I said, we're monitoring the situation very closely because at this point, everything that's moving along is moving at a pace where we don't know what the end goal is here. I mean, the best thing that we have to go off of right now, the best insight that we have into the intelligence community is what Marco Rubio tweeted out because he's privy to that information as the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He says in the hours to come, Russia will conduct strikes on air defense systems. We already see that taking place. As I showed you in that other map, it appears that that one Ukrainian air base in the eastern part of Ukraine is getting hit particularly hard. Then move to cut off Kiev from Eastern Europe. That means or from, Eastern Ukraine, but that means that Russian forces could go well beyond that Donbas region that Russian President Vladimir Putin recognized the independence of. I mean, they could go all the way to the central part of Ukraine up to that point, to the border of Kyiv, and then they say to move to cut off Ukraine's military forces on the line of contact in the east to prevent them from falling back to defend Kyiv. So, I mean, this is really a suggestion that perhaps Kyiv itself could be under attack, be facing a siege. I mean, that whole point that Rubio is laying out right there is the understanding that perhaps the end goal is taking Kyiv outright. Now, Putin said that he didn't want to occupy Ukraine in his speech, but what does that mean? I mean, that likely suggests that he's going to move into Kyiv, try to remove the current government there and install his own. I mean, he says he won't occupy it, but I think that it's safe to say that at the very least, he wants to nation build there of some sort. And I say nation build in the sense of just install his own government, maybe the same way that he essentially has in Belarus, where they have the puppet Lukashenko regime that essentially does whatever Putin says. But at this point, it looks like the operation is completely underway. I mean, we see that President Biden was already calling it an act of war. We already see that there's bombings going on in separate cities across the country. We even have the idea that there are perhaps troops coming in through the Crimean Peninsula right now into the southern part of Ukraine. Again, I showed you those images. That was the ending of the the whole scene right there. But at one point, for people who were following before, this was the Ukrainian guard at that outpost right there who recognized something, began running away. You can see it in this image right here, where you can kind of see him ducking and kind of trying to check up on it before he departs altogether. But then shortly afterward, the outpost goes completely blank, and then you see another troop arrive in a different uniform, kind of looking around the area, and then the feed goes out. And it is worth noting too that among all this going on right now, there are also intense cyber attacks going on Ukrainian entities, parts of the government. I mean, that's coming down at about the same time. But we are also hearing that perhaps there could be outgoing artillery and rocket fire in the Belgorod in Russia. That is the northern part, kind of the northeast part. And that would suggest that there's an operation going underway on that Kharkiv city that I was saying before. That was one that a lot of people were talking about earlier in the day. In fact, when ABC News first reported that Russian military officials were going into their briefing room, essentially their war room, that was the city that really people thought could be the first offensive. I mean, it's close enough to the Russian border. It wouldn't be as crazy of an incursion as going to Kyiv or something. But that was something that perhaps, if there was going to be an attack tonight, as it now looks like there is, that was going to be the place that was first kind of come down upon. So as I said, right now there's still the United Nations Security Council meeting going on. Not too much news coming out of that necessarily. Antonio Guterres essentially admitting before that the chance for peace that he thought existed at this point doesn't look plausible. He was calling on Russian President Vladimir Putin to really come back to the table and try to reach a diplomatic solution to this. But I mean, from what we've seen throughout this entire process, it just looks like Putin has made up his mind that he's moving forward with this invasion. I mean, we went through his speech the other day about how he goes through this revisionist history of Russia within itself, and how the fall of the Soviet Union was really the most defining moment of his life in the past century, really, is what he said. And if you think about what's happened over the past century, that's quite a remarkable statement within itself. But here is Reuters once again reporting too that a series of explosions heard in Belgorod province of Russia. So perhaps that is a retaliatory attack by Ukraine to really go after their artillery systems that are right there. But it was also worth noting what Putin said in his speech. In fact, I'll try to find the exact quote, but what he said is that if anybody retaliates against this, that there's going to be severe consequences like the world has never seen. I mean, this looks like a man who's willing to risk it all to some degree in order to get what he wants here. I'm trying to find the exact quote for you so I can quote it verbatim, but I mean, if we've looked at what Putin was doing over the past couple of days, I mean, this, quite frankly, doesn't look like the moves of a rational leader. I mean, you could make an argument on either side saying, you know what, maybe his concerns about NATO expansion are valid, but to move forward with an invasion in the manner that he has, and basically just publicizing his true intents, I mean, today it kind of did seem like he was more willing to be a little more careful with his words, but the other day, I mean, he barely mentioned NATO. He made it very clear that this is about a return to the Soviet Union, the former USSR that he cherishes so much. So the address that he gave, there was a little bit of a mistake before. Some people thought that there was a new address at a time when he was actually getting a pre-recorded address going, but then he eventually did come on the air for an emergency meeting. But there's also reports coming in. Fox News is actually airing this, saying that there are reports of Russian troops coming up through Crimea, the southern border of Ukraine. I think that's the first area where we're really going to get a confirmation of troops on the ground in Ukraine. It looks like a lot of the artillery is coming from the north and the east of Ukraine, but it looks like there's actually troop movements through the southern parts. So here, there's been explosions heard in Kyiv, Odessa, and Mariupol. That's actually another southern city that perhaps could be where those troops are going to from the Crimean Peninsula. We know that that's the area where if troops are going to come in, they are going to come in through the south. That Mariupol city is on the southern part of Ukraine, so that might be the first city that sees an actual urban type of conflict, and that there's something to be said about the type of war that this would be if there is going to be a full-scale invasion. Ukraine doesn't have the military to match up with Russia on that front. I mean, they're two different levels of really their capabilities, but what could be in Ukraine's favor, if there is one, is a prolonged type of guerrilla warfare. In fact, we've heard from Ukrainian officials throughout the past couple of weeks that worst case scenario, they would just open their weapons depots and allow the people of Ukraine to defend for themselves. We just saw them today issue a proclamation allowing the Ukrainian people to carry firearms. That was something that they announced along with a state of emergency, as well as calling up reservists. But it looks like at this point, that might be too late to really do anything. Now, I do want to bring you this video that's being shared around as well that shows perhaps explosions taking place within Kyiv over itself. Once again, I mean, it's safe. I think it's safe to say that these are most likely Russian forces, but here's the video right here. You'll see the blast go off, but once again, this could be a blast from Russian separatists, but it looks like if it's reaching Kyiv with their missile defense systems and really the security that is in place between the eastern part of Ukraine as well as Kyiv, that this would almost certainly be a capability from Russia within itself. But once again, a scary sight to see if they're coming in. But there are reports of cruise missiles throughout the different parts of Ukraine. Once again, most likely targeting missile defense systems, maybe airports. We did hear that earlier tonight, Ukraine was preparing for a potential invasion. What they were doing was laying down their tractors on the runways of different airports in order to prevent Russian air forces from being able to land them and maybe use them at different parts. But here we go. Explosions reported around Kyiv's airport and heard in the city at 5:30 a.m. local time. So that would kind of line up with not only what we heard from Marco Rubio earlier about the type of intelligence of them trying to attack missile defense systems and airports, but once again, for it to be hitting Kyiv that close, I mean, that's really alarming right there. And the type of operation that we're talking about too is really coming from all parts of Ukraine. I mean, I'm seeing different notifications coming in really from Mariupol, from Kaski, from Kyiv now. I mean, there's a large-scale operation going on from an artillery standpoint that explosions are really taking place all over. And in fact, we are hearing that there are confirmed missile strikes from CNN in Kyiv right now. So that shows you how deep this operation is really going. The Ukrainian Interior Minister actually just confirming that a Russian invasion is now underway and that cruise missiles have hit the areas in Kyiv. That's a very alarming situation, not only because of the fact that this is an urban area, but how deep into Ukraine this operation is reportedly going. And once again, I mean, Ukraine is in a position where to a large degree they're sitting ducks here. I mean, they don't have the military to match up like this. They don't have the military to really go head to head with an invasion. There have been maybe like preparations for trench warfare at the very early parts that could maybe deter a quick type of thing. I know there were reports over the past couple of days were saying that Russia could take Kyiv within 72 hours. That still seems very hard at this point, but from what we're seeing all across, it's clear that they are taking an approach to really make sure that Ukraine is completely handcuffed from a military standpoint, from a defense standpoint, and really a communication standpoint as well. I mean, we see that they're the cyber attacks really that are executing against them are really at the heart of the Ukrainian government and also communications abilities. But once again, the big news that's coming out right now is that there's a lot of missile activity taking place in Kyiv. In fact, you're looking at some of the video right there, but there's a lot of reports coming out that there are cruise missile strikes on different parts around the Kyiv area. Now, it's not within the city itself, which is good, but I'm trying to find a little bit more video to show you right now. In fact, this is... I'm going to turn the sound up for this one too, but this is in the Mariupol area that I was saying in the southern part of Ukraine. That is where the invasion, the land invasion, would most likely take place north of the Crimean Peninsula. But here's what the video that's circulating around. You can hear the blasts. I mean, once again, as this individual says, this isn't small artillery. This sounds like cruise missiles, and that follows up with reporting that we've heard coming out of Kyiv as well, is that these are cruise missiles taking place. So once again, not only are those more targeted, but they can also carry capabilities that are much larger, much more able to take out pivotal defense systems. And let's see where we're at with the United Nations. So this is the Russian Federation.
Without distinction of race, creed or colour, the whole people living in that territory. End of quote. Today's government in Ukraine simply is not that. And the tragedy in Ukraine started indeed after the illegal coup in Maidan in 2014, when, rather than dialogue with the Russian-speaking citizens of Ukraine, the new authorities brandished guns and airplanes at them. Information and testimony to this end is more than sufficient. However, our Western colleagues prefer not to notice this. We tried yesterday and today, before yesterday, to explain to you the logic of the decision made by Russia to recognise the LPR and DPR, and we focused on the need to ensure peace and security there. However, you didn't want to hear this, and you don't want to hear it now. For you, those living in the Donbass are simply pawns in a geopolitical game focused on weakening Russia and promoting the bloc from NATO to its borders. For us, these people are women, children, the elderly, who for 8 years have been cowering from Ukraine's shelling and provocations. For us, these are Ukraine people and not the Maidan authorities. In this is the difference in our approaches. If you do not change the geopolitical lens, you will never understand us. Then, on those on whose behalf this decision I mentioned was made, who you've not even thought about for over these 8 years, simply calling them pro-Russian separatists and terrorists. Those people are the most important for us. I'd like to say once again that the root of today's crisis around Ukraine is the actions of Ukraine itself, who for many years was sabotaging its obligations under the Minsk package of measures. Last week even, there was a hope that Kiev would rethink and nevertheless implement what it signed up to do in 2015.
So as you guys are listening to the Russian Federation President, this is the United Nations Security Council meeting right now. He's giving the justification for Russia's incursion into Ukraine.
That Ukraine is not ready for this type of dialogue, and steps to grant Donbass special status as set forth in the Minsk agreement,
were targeting the city's
while
international airport,
with the support of this position from Western backers, finally convinced us that we simply cannot force those living in the Donbass to suffer more. And as much as I already said, the Ukrainian provocation against those in Donbass not only has not stopped but has intensified. The leaders of the LPR and the DPR turned to us with a request to provide military support in line with bilateral cooperation agreements as agreed at the same time as they were recognition. This is a logical step, which is a consequence of the actions of the Ukrainian regime. During this meeting, the President of Russia, Putin, spoke with and said that he made a decision for a special military operation in the Donbass. We don't know all the details today, but briefly I would like to inform you that from his statement it says that the occupation of Ukraine is not in our plans. The aim of this special operation is to protect the people who, for over 8 years, have been suffering genocide from the Kiev regime. And for this, we will aim to demilitarize and de-genocide in Ukraine, and also support those and hold accountable those who carried out so many crimes against civilians, including citizens of the Russian Federation. This decision was made in line with Article 51 of the UN Charter and the sanction of the Russian Federation. And
okay, so I'm going to actually get out of this because this guy is just lying, and he's trying to give the pretext once again that's saying that this is about the liberation of the people in Donbass, the 4 million people living there. But I mean, we're seeing from the strikes tonight that even the Russian operation goes far beyond the Donbass region into Kiev itself. In fact, I want to show you this clip. Once again, I showed you before what CNN was airing, and then explosions happening in the background. The guy put on a Kevlar vest.
But it's deeply disturbing about what's taking place in Ukraine right now.
Perhaps you can help me out with this. CNN is getting reporting.
Okay. Yeah, so I just stepped away there, Don, because my producer was telling me that an advisor to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry, who we've just been speaking to, says that the invasion has begun. That was his words. And he said that what we've been hearing, these explosions, are missile strikes. He didn't give any further detail about what has been hit, about what's been targeted. But again, the advisor to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry telling CNN that the invasion has begun, those are his words, and that those explosions that we've been witnessing here in Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, on missile strikes. So there's a development, some clarity perhaps from the Ukrainian side, and their but is deeply.
So there you go. That was kind of what we were talking about. There's confirmation from CNN right there saying that not only has the invasion begun, but of course what they were hearing before in that clip where I showed you where he kind of ducked and said, oh, there's explosions going on. Those were indeed missile strikes. We are learning that those are missile strikes on the international airport a little bit more east of the downtown area of Kyiv, but nonetheless a strike nonetheless. And I guess former President Trump is currently on Laura Ingraham talking about this entire situation, saying that he believes he's not even sure if President Biden's awake, stuff like that. But nonetheless, we're going to focus on exactly what's happening on the ground in Ukraine right now instead of talking about the political ramifications, because this is a breaking situation. And for a lot of people in Ukraine right now, it's a life and death situation. So we do have reports coming in that Russian aircraft are en route to conduct additional targeted strikes on a number of key defense sites through Ukraine. The Kharkiv location that we were talking about, as well as the city in southeast Ukraine, those are already being targeted because the Ukrainian base is there. You have to assume that missile defense systems will be the first things to be hit, as well as airports, anything that can really challenge Russian military operations that'll come in from the sky first, and then of course artillery as well. But it's a step-by-step process here. You first look at, what's the most immediate target? You would assume that would be the case where they're going after, as I was saying, airports, missile defense systems, anything that could limit their abilities right now. But I do want to bring this map up just to show you the locations that we're talking about in all of this, instead of just listing these cities, because I know that doesn't do a lot of people any good. So right now there are confirmations of attacks in several cities taking place. We're going to go to this right now so you can get a visual about where this is taking place. But this isn't just a couple. These are all the different locations where there are attacks underway. You could assume that most of them on the eastern part were going to take place, but when you look at how deep it's getting in, especially Kyiv, you look at one would assume that a lot of the artillery and a lot of the cruise missile strikes were coming in from the north right there. That's Belarus. That's not even Russian territory, but that's where the joint drills have been taking place for the better part of a month or so. They were supposed to leave on February 20th, of course, then they got extended. Now we know why, or I think we can assume why. But the thing that I guess Ukrainian officials are looking at right now is a potential amphibious landing by Russian forces in Odessa. That would be the southern area right here. So there's more than likely not going to be taking multiple ground invasions from separate entry points. The northern one is the most alarming one, I think, that you have to look at, because it's right there by Belarus. There's a large buildup of Russian troops in that area, and U.S. intelligence officials just as recently as last week were saying that Kyiv could be taken in less than 72 hours, or 72 hours, if that's indeed what they wanted to do. It sure looks like that's what they want to do at this point, because as we said, attacks are underway, different parts of the country. Kyiv, of course, being the one that's most alarming for a lot of people. But let's see. I'm with a lot of you guys right now, just kind of monitoring this. There's a lot of moving parts. This is something that we've talked about for the past couple of weeks, and now to see it kind of coming to fruition, it's a scary time, because we don't know the end game. We don't know the extent. What Putin laid out, for example, doesn't really give us an idea of what his end game is. He did say in his speech that he didn't want to occupy it, but once again, that's not something that you can take at face value, because a lot of his other claims have been completely bonkers, to be honest. They haven't been true, but you have to go off of kind of what he's saying to some degree, because that's all you really have. Here, let's check into this. So here's Ukraine. Let's listen to what they're saying.
To relinquish responsibilities of the President of the Security Council, pass these responsibilities on to a legitimate member of the Security Council, a member that is respectful of the Charter, and I ask the members of the Security Council to convene an emergency meeting immediately and consider all necessary draft decisions to stop the war
I just want to pop in here and say this.
Because it's too
Russia
late,
is
my dear
leading
colleagues,
this
to
United
speak
Nations
about
Security Council
de-escalation.
meeting as
late.
part of its rotating basis. So that's
The
what this
Russian
Ukrainian
president
ambassador is saying.
declared the
Like,
war
we need to get
on the
this
record. Should
guy
I play the
out of
video
here to make sure
of your
that
president?
there's a legitimate power that's running this United Nations Council
Ambassador,
and
shall
not
I do it
Russia, who's
right now? Or you
responsible
can
for these
confirm it?
actions. But I'll go back in.
Do not interrupt me, please. Thank you.
Then don't ask me questions when you are speaking. Proceed with your statement.
Anyway, you declare the war. It is the responsibility of this body to stop the war. So I call on every one of you to do everything possible to stop the war. Or should I play the video with your president declaring the war? Thank you very much.
Опять я вынужден сказать.
Against, I must say that I thank the representative of Ukraine for his statement, and the questions, I wasn't planning to answer them because I've already said all I know at this point.
So here's Russia, of
Waking
course,
up
responding to Ukraine just
Minister
now.
Lavrov at this time is not something I plan to do. He said the information that we have will be something we provide. And this isn't called a war, this is called a special military operation in the Donbass. I now give the floor to the representative of Germany.
Mr. President, we meet at the very moment of a military escalation we have not experienced in Europe for over a generation's time. The President of the Russian Federation announced a military operation on Ukrainian territory. We condemn this in the strongest possible terms. And we call upon all members of the Security Council and the United Nations to now stand up for Ukraine and against a shameless breach of international law. 2 days ago, Russia's decision to recognize the self-proclaimed so-called People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk was harshly rejected in this Council. It had already dealt a devastating blow to the principles and the international order that the United
Now, this is Germany speaking right now, and Germany over the past couple of days has actually taken a much more hardline stance against Russia than it has in the days leading up to this latest escalation. I mean, you heard German Chancellor Olaf Scholz say that they're going to be pausing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The German insurance company behind the pipeline even kind of backed out of the contract. So it looks like the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, the threats made against it are finally coming to fruition. Some saying it's too little, too late. But it's going to be interesting to see what Germany does at this point, because I think a lot of people were hoping that the sanctions and the threats of sanctions would really prevent Putin from doing anything extreme. But from what we're seeing tonight, this is worst case scenario. This is an invasion that looks like it's going to be underway into Ukraine, going all the way up to Kyiv. We see cruise missile strikes into Kyiv right now. We see bombings across the country, taking aim at airports, at missile defense systems. So listening to the German ambassador, it's going to be interesting to hear the change of tone. And what you just heard there from the Ukrainian ambassador was him really going after the sitting president for the United Nations Security Council, which is Russia tonight. They do it on a rotating basis, but Russia, of course, is there. And so the Ukrainian president really trying to press him on that, trying to get some answers, and the Russian Federation president basically saying, you know, I didn't come here prepared for those type of questions tonight, a major cop-out. But for those just joining us, what is going on right now is that there are multiple missile attacks taking place across the country of Ukraine, leading all the way up to Kyiv, actually. I'll put the map back up. I'll put the map back up so we can get a visual of where the different attacks are happening, because it's not just an isolated thing. I mean, we see them going up all across the country, especially on the eastern part of the country, but as well west as Kyiv. And I'm going to return to what Marco Rubio said earlier, because, I mean, once again, he's privy to this type of information. He knows exactly what we could be looking at tonight. I might have closed that tab, but essentially what he was saying is that over the past couple of hours, we're going to see an operation that involves targeting missile defense systems, taking a lot of the east, cutting off military troops from the east so they can't fall back and really defend Kyiv. And essentially he made it look like even Kyiv could be a target at the end of the day. He was saying that in his speech that he doesn't want to occupy Ukraine, but that essentially he was laying down international law framework for what he thinks needs to be done in order to replace the government there. So a really alarming thing coming out of him on that front, as well as his actions tonight. I mean, that's really what we need to be looking at the most, because I mean, we've been warning about an invasion for a couple of weeks now at this point, but I think the scariness of all of this situation is the uncertainty that you don't necessarily know what the end game is. You don't necessarily know what Putin wants to get out of this. I mean, he says that he doesn't want to occupy Ukraine, but just a couple of days ago he said that it would only be an attack on, or I'm sorry, that there would only be peacekeepers in the Donbas region, which is just that eastern part of Ukraine that you're looking at on your map right now. But as we can see from the different stars, I mean, there are operations going on across the country, all the way west inland to Kyiv. But we know that the United States, as we just came out of that United Nations Security Council meeting, is saying that they'll bring a resolution to the UN tomorrow for the bodies to vote on, and there's going to be some harsh reactions to what's happening right now. I mean, sanctions, I think, at this point is the very least. I mean, we're looking at a assault taking place not only on certain regions of Ukraine, but even the capital itself. In fact, I'm seeing confirmation. Ukraine's Interior Ministry confirms that Kyiv is under attack from cruise and ballistic missiles. That speaks to the gravity that we're talking about right now. I mean, it's not just these targeted things in defense systems, that it's just not airports, but it looks like airports are the primary targets as of right now. In fact, the cruise missiles and the ballistic that we were talking about going into Ukraine, it's actually a little bit east of Kyiv. That's the target that they're looking at, the international airport, but we're hearing that a lot of the other targets is also mostly airports, mostly air defense systems at this point, really anything that could prevent a Russian incursion. But you have to remember, at the same time, there's a buildup of almost 200,000 troops. So to say that those people are just going to sit by on the sidelines and wait, that's naive. I mean, it looks like the cruise missiles will be the first wave, then perhaps other artillery, other aircraft. And I do want to revisit this for people who are just joining us. I mean, this was a rather spectacular scene earlier. I'll start from the beginning here, but this is a Ukrainian checkpoint just north of the Crimean Peninsula. This perhaps was the first footage of an incursion or an invasion taking place. So you can see that the Ukrainian guard is kind of like reacting to something, and he eventually runs away. You can see him hiding behind the booth at one point, but then he flees, and then just a couple of minutes later, lights go out, and he ran away. It was eerily silent for a long time. And then a couple minutes later, you see another guard appear in a different uniform, kind of checking out the area. This might be the first image that we saw of a Russian incursion into Ukraine. But this is one of the areas that we were talking about too, the Kramatorsk. There's a Ukrainian airbase right there, defense system as well. And that was maybe one of the initial targets being launched by cruise missiles. Falling in line with exactly what we were talking about the entire time of what would take place. Marco Rubio was really the first one to lay out what we should be seeing over the next couple of hours. Once again, Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, he's privy to this type of information, so maybe it's not surprising to see that, but for him to publicize it and to really see the execution just minutes later, I think that at this point we can say the information that he was putting out there was pretty correct. But throughout all of this as well, I just want to pop it back in and see where we're at. I mean, the Russian Federation president was still denying the fact that there was a war taking place in Ukraine. I mean, they're really sticking to this idea, or this false pretext, I should say, that this is a peacekeeping mission, that they're going in there to liberate these Russian speakers in the Donbas region in Ukraine. And I guess the way that they bring peace is through missiles and other bombings. But it's also a scary time too, because I mean, right now it's 5 o'clock my time. I'm in Rome, by the way, but it's 5 o'clock here. It's going to be 6 o'clock in Ukraine in about a minute. The sun's going to be coming up, and a lot of people in Ukraine are going to be waking up to the idea that they are now a country that's under war. Some people went to bed last night, maybe knowing that was a possibility, but today it became very real. And So here's another video of a military facility being hit. Once again, these are targeted airstrikes taking place across the country. I was showing you what was taking place in Kyiv before. This is in Dnipro, I believe is what's called, a military facility. But once again, a pretty dramatic explosion right there. And the types of explosions that we're seeing too suggest that this is large-scale artillery. In fact, we did get confirmation from the Ukrainian defense minister that there are cruise missiles taking place. So once again, by no means a small-scale invasion, by no means something that I think you can realistically categorize as being a peacekeeping mission, despite the best efforts of the Russian government. But I'm keeping a close eye. I'm kind of monitoring this along with you guys. So if anybody here sees anything, don't hesitate to drop it as well. I'll do my best to try to verify it. I mean, a lot of information coming in. We're getting reports of civilians fleeing Kyiv, going westward, a lot of them trying to make their way to Poland. I mean, as you could imagine, with their country now under attack. So yes, as I was saying before, and in fact, this is the scary thing to look at, but there was a buildup taking place in Belgorod in Russia, the traffic going into Ukraine, and now we see that there are shots and explosions heard at the Komarin checkpoint. That's a little bit just kind of south of Belarus, but that is an alarming thing to take place because, as we were saying, there's big drills taking place in Belarus. There's a big buildup of Russian troops, but it's also the closest entry point going to Kyiv. U.S. intelligence officials were fearing that Kyiv could be overrun within 72 hours. The fact that if this ends up being true, that there's already a infantry invasion taking place from that, it suggests that Kyiv is the target here. And now we did see the airport there be targeted by cruise missiles before, but that's another region to look at right there because it's the closest entry point from the north, and really, if Kyiv might be the goal here. I mean, the Donbas region and all that was kind of the pretext. But what we've heard from Putin over the past couple of days is that he really wants to kind of rethink of what Ukraine as a country is altogether. And so one would assume that the ending goal here is taking Kyiv, kind of removing President Vladimir Zelensky, instilling a more Russia-friendly government in there. And yes, and now so I mean, it appears as if we have confirmation on several ends of an infantry invasion taking place, because now we're hearing that landing operation by the forces of the Black Sea Fleet in the Sea of Azov and in Odessa. So that would be in the southern part as well. So I mean, we're looking at potential entry points coming from different parts of Ukraine, the north, from Belarus into Kyiv, from Crimea in the south, and then I guess now we're hearing from the southeast as well. So it appears as if the first wave, cruise missiles, the second wave will involve an infantry invasion of some sort. We do have a statement right here from Ukraine's defense minister that I'm going to put on the screen as well. This is the defense minister saying, Putin has launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Peaceful Ukrainian cities are under strikes. This is a war of aggression. Ukraine will defend itself and will win. The world can and must stop Putin. The time to act is now. So we do have confirmation from some degree about the extent of what's taking place, although I think a lot of it has been confirmed as we've been watching this. But we do, so I mean, right now everything is going on. It's not just a couple cruise missile strikes. We're still getting reports of new explosions right now taking place in Kyiv. We're also hearing reports of explosions in the Chernihiv region, that's along the northern border with Belarus. That's where Russian troops are stationed. Once again, the entry point that would be closest to Kyiv. So perhaps that'll be a region where we do see a lot of conflict, a lot of actual engagement, as opposed to maybe anything more passive, because there's going to be parts where the Ukrainian army just can't match up with the Russian army. And so we are going to see parts where Russian troops do end up moving a little bit quicker, but we know that the parts that they are going to worth fighting for is really when it comes to taking Kyiv. That's something that the Ukrainian military just quite frankly can't allow to happen, because if Kyiv is taken, that's the downfall of Ukraine, really. Let's check in with the United Nations. Here we are. Appears as if they're taking a pause for the time being. But we do know that the United States is going to bring a resolution to the United Nations tomorrow. What that entails, we don't know yet. President Biden also releasing a statement saying that he's going to be applying more sanctions tomorrow, kind of coordinating with other allies as far as response. But looks like that United Nations feed just went out, but so yeah, I do want to bring up the map of what we're looking at again, but because we are seeing that there's confirmation of troops, Russian troops landing in Odessa. That's another region to keep an eye on. We were talking about troops coming in through Belarus from the north. We were talking about how the Donbas region will probably be an easier path just because there's Russian-backed separatists right there who could be a little bit more facilitative. But what we're looking at here, just trying to bring up one of these maps. I'll just go to the map. So this is the landing point right now that we're seeing confirmation that Russian troops are landing in. It's known as Odessa. I'm going to zoom out right here. But it's a little bit more inland as well. So this isn't exactly, you know, on the border of Ukraine or anything like that. I mean, you look at how inward this is. Once again, here's Crimea to the south. But when we're looking at Odessa, the bottom part of Ukraine right here, in fact, I'll bring it up on the, sorry, I just noticed that you guys can't see it, but you can see Odessa at the bottom part of the map right there. The Ukrainian border, I mean, here's Crimea in the center part of the screen, the peninsula that you can kind of get an eye on, but then I mean, all the way over here is Russia, and then you'd have to go through the Donbas region, I mean, essentially equidistant to where Kyiv is, and then just go down south from there. So it appears as if there's entry points right now going towards Kyiv from the north, from the south as well with infantry. So it appears that Kyiv is the end goal here. That's what it's shaping up to be. Now, once again, I don't have any information that you guys don't have at this point, but we're just following the military drills and the military movements, I should say, that are coming in from drills in Belarus from the north, as well as an amphibious type of invasion taking place from the south. There's already been cruise missile strikes in Kharkiv, in even outside of Kyiv as well at the international airport. I mean, there's a large-scale operation taking place involving cruise missiles, involving artillery, involving bombings, and now we're hearing, of course, troop movements coming in from the north from Belarus, the south through Crimea, and then a little bit more westward in the south through Odessa. So once again, things are moving quickly. So once again, here's another video that I'm just going to bring you guys. It seems like a lot of the targets right now are these warehouses. A lot of, I mean, as we were saying before, anything that could really deter a Russian invasion. The most notable things being airports, missile defense systems, but we're also seeing that military warehouses are being hit from different areas, Ukrainian bases as well. So, I mean, this is a moment, not to be cliche, I mean, how many times have we said it over the past couple of years, but a defining moment in European history, world history as well, because this just went from a cold conflict to a hot conflict in the matter of hours. So I just want to read you guys the closing words of the United Nations Security Council meeting from the Ukrainian ambassador as he stares down the Russian ambassador. He says, "There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, ambassador." So by no means wincing words there about how he feels about this current situation. But once again, the sun is coming up in the eastern part of Ukraine right now. Explosions still going on in areas such as Kharkiv, outside of Ukraine, these different weapons depots. So the question is right now is, where does this all go? I mean, what is the end operation here? Is it, I mean, going up to the Kyiv border so that, I mean, it's everything leading up to that point? Is there an effort here to take Kyiv? At this point, we just don't know. We're going to keep monitoring these movements. Here, let me see here. I'm trying to get some more confirmation on other troop movements that are coming in, because we do have isolated cruise missiles taking place in different areas, but what we really want to get is this whole wide breadth of what we're looking at, exactly what type of operation we're looking at a large scale, because yeah, so Russian troopers have landed in Odessa and are crossing the border into Kharkiv. So once again, we do have confirmation of the Russian movements taking place from the north into Belarus, the south from Crimea, and of course the southwest coming from Odessa. So a lot of moving parts that are taking place across the board. So, I mean, there's no doubt to say that the Russian invasion is underway of Ukraine. It's just a matter of how deep they intend to go, how much land they do want to take, and really what the ultimate goal of this operation is, because at this point we just don't know. We haven't been given a clear guidance on what happens at the end of this. We don't have a clear guidance on what the end intent of all of this is. And I'm monitoring this the same way that you guys are. I mean, just kind of trying to figure out what the Ukrainian people are waking up to tomorrow, or I should say today, for me. And as I said, the sun is coming up in the eastern part of Ukraine right now. A lot of people waking up to a completely different world than the one they fell asleep in. Okay, you guys, I'm gonna log off for a quick moment. Got to do some things for work right here, but be sure to follow me on the different social media platforms. You have them listed in the top right of your corner right there, on it, basically every social media platform at Alex Salvi News. We're going to be doing this a lot over the next couple of days, because I mean, an escalating situation, a historic situation taking place right now. We're going to be following it closely. Once again, if you guys see anything, don't hesitate to shoot it over too, because I mean, as I said, I'm learning the same way that you guys are right now, so I'll check in with you guys later. Keep me updated as well, and I will talk to you all soon.